Chapter 6: The Gendered Family. Contemporary society has been deliberating over the stability of the family, that is, the family values debate. Traditionalists use statistics to present a decline in the family, arguing that the 1950s family is ideal, whereas others argue changes in the family are not a decline, but a reflection of changes in social and economic forces. Part of the issue is really a contention about feminism and the changes brought about by the women's movement. The American family has changed over time, beginning as early as the 18th century, as the American family took on a more individualistic perspective, and thus more intimate relationships between family members, resulting in less violence in the home. Beginning in the 19th century, there was a shift to the separation of spheres, with the family becoming a less central institution as capitalism flourished. Fathers worked outside the home and mothers were responsible for home and child care. Women's status and power declined during this era, whereas fathers lost connection with the family. Although these standards of the family were more accessible to white, middle-class families, they were expected of all families. World War I marked a change in the spheres as women entered the labor force out of need. It was followed by the 50s, and a push for the nuclear family to be considered the natural family form, in an attempt to reduce conflict about labor force participation, as well as to make a safer environment for children. Still, the standard of the nuclear family did not truly exist, as diversity of family forms flourished. The family was the strongest in the 1970s, but economic changes in the 1980s negatively impacted the family. People put off marriage and having children, which resulted in fewer children. There was also a rise in divorce rates, and more cohabitating couples and single-parent homes, all of which are related to gender inequity, both because of the separation of spheres and because of the inequality that exists in the working world. Marriage is presented as being more beneficial to women than men, but the reality is men gain much more from it than women, both inside and outside of the home. As well, it is assumed children add to the family, but in fact having children negatively impacts the family more than it benefits it. Still, it is the primary role of the family, and of women specifically. Beginning at birth, parents raise gendered children, engaging with them in different ways, directing them toward different activities, and having different expectations for them. As a result, children develop gendered expectations early in life and engage in gender-appropriate behaviors, such as boys avoiding anything feminine. Although there have been changes in accepting a greater range of behaviors, this has been mostly for girls, which is largely caused by the greater social status and power of boys. The acceptable behaviors for men and women are best displayed in the inequality of housework. Although women are working more outside of the home than in previous years, the increase in the work men do in the home has not been as dramatic. Men actively avoid doing housework, identifying it more as women's work, which men help to complete. Women, as a result, have a second shift of work at home after a full-time job outside of the home. The time women spend working in the home actually increases after they get married. This is not so in all families, because black men are more likely to share housework. Child care is the area in which we are seeing the greatest contribution by men, but the sharing of work is not equal. Men are making more career decisions to allow them more time with family, but for this to become available to all men, not only do men have to desire it, but also society has to allow for it. In fact, society continues to gender family-related issues. Daycare is a consistent concern for families, and mothers in particular, because they feel guilty for putting their children in daycare. Similarly, teen pregnancy is a gendered construct that constantly questions women's freedoms, even sexually, and feminism in particular, while ignoring men and their part in it. The family issue linked to men is their absence and the negative impact on children, which ignores the gender inequities that have a greater impact on children as the result of a father's absence, such as poverty. Similarly, the problems caused by divorce are related to other social factors, with the primary one being conflict between the parents. One of the biggest issues in divorce is child custody, because it is extremely gendered and ultimately impacts relationships with children. The hardest hit is the daughter-father relationship. One issue that continues to be socially and politically debated is gay and lesbian marriage, which is perceived as an attack on marriage. A similar debate involves the ability of gays and lesbians to have and adopt children. Although the discussion surrounds access to rights for gays and lesbians and the fear of unstable gay, although not lesbian relationships, what is truly being debated is the acceptance and legitimation of the gay and lesbian lifestyle. Family violence is a larger social problem that is gendered and has a tremendous impact on children. Yet actions such as corporal punishment are still utilized in society. As much as it is a form of punishment, it also teaches a child about the use of violence, as does any violence in the home. Overall, what must be considered about issues in the family is the well-being of its members. How a family responds to social issues determines the context and subsequent effect on the family. Addressing these issues does not require an overhaul of ideology or policies, but an interaction between its members based on respect and equality. After studying this chapter, you should achieve the following 5 learning objectives. 1. To understand the historical trajectory of the American family from the 18th century to the 21st, in particular how the 1950s fit into this history. 2. To be able to name some of the ways in which marriage and divorce benefit or harm men and women differently. 3. To understand the ways in which gender socialization occurs in the family. 4. To know how housework and childcare are differentially distributed by gender. 5. To be able to discuss the problems of contemporary family life and distinguish between the actual problems and the constructed problems, in particular regarding daycare, the increasing fertility of teenage women, fatherlessness, divorce, child custody, gay and lesbian families, and family violence. The Gendered Society. Chapter 6. The Gendered Family. Our families are places in which we are both constrained by duty and obligation and inspired by love, respect, and honor. The gendered family. Which is true? The family is fragile. The family is a resilient institution. Both. Is the family in crisis? Misplaced nostalgia. Romanticized notion of the 1950s family form. Much of the debate about the crisis of family is based on a misreading of history. History of the family separation of spheres. American families marrying for affection, not dowries. Beginning of 19th century changes occurred. Paid work shifted from home and farm to mill, factory, shop, office, men's work. House cleaning. Child rearing left to women, God's given mission. New ideologies. Female domesticity, cult of domesticity. Women excluded from the new democracy. Race and the separation of spheres. Largely a white, middle-class family form, imposed on others as the norm. Working class and women of color always worked. Men shared in housework and childcare. Out of necessity if not ideological commitment. 20th century crisis of the family. 1909 Teddy Roosevelt. Avoid race suicide, white women have babies. World War II. White, middle-class women entered the labor force. Increase in marriage rates. Decline in age of first birth. Birth of suburbia. 1950s family life declared natural. Convergence of historical, demographic, economic circumstances. Post-1950s family. 1963 The feminine mystique. Crack forming in this modern family form. 70s and 80s the family was strong. Low divorce rates. Good economic and social conditions. Since 80s withdrawal of public support. Decreased wages. Decreased leisure time. Decreased funding for public housing. Greater needs for both parents to work. Economic downturn. Contemporary families. Increasing diversity of form. Age of marriage has crept up. Number of children has declined. Rise of the single-parent home. 1/5 of children live in blended families. Fewer people marry. Rise in cohabitation. Divorce rates high. Support for separate spheres has weakened. Traditional family, a normative idea, not a reality. Gendered marriage. Cultural definition of marriage. The woman lands a man. She wants it, he has to be coerced. Marriage benefits men. Married men report greater happiness than single men. Unmarried women report greater happiness than single women. Married men report higher satisfaction. Men remarry quicker. Married men report better health than single men. Gendered marriage. Marriage benefits men and women. Married people have more sex, longer life expectancies, lower levels of risky behavior, lower levels of suicide, depression. Marital happiness scores declining for men and women. Economic hardships. Work-family negotiations. Changing attitudes. Gendered marriage. Childless couples report more marital happiness. Gender socialization begins at birth. Parents know the sex of child right away. Baby boys and girls treated/held differently. Gender-specific toys. Physical appearance becomes important. Children develop two gender cultures. Boys acquire masculinity by avoiding femininity. Girls have more boy toys than boys have girl toys. Girls see advantages to being a boy. The gendered politics of housework and childcare. More women in the workforce. Women report higher levels of stress than do men. Second shift for women. Men's roles in the family have changed. Much less change in terms of amount of housework. Her domain. Indoors kitchen, laundry room, bedrooms, bathrooms. His domain. Outdoors basement, garage, trash receptacles. The gendered politics of housework and childcare. Men are doing more housework. Studies reveal fathers' increased housework equals increased marital satisfaction. Women are doing less housework. Women still perform the great majority of housework and childcare. When men marry, amount of housework is reduced. When women marry, amount of housework is increased. The gendered politics of housework and childcare. Mothers spend more time with children than fathers do. Men report wanting to spend more time with family. American men's rate of participation is lower than those in other industrialized nations. Many men unwilling to make sacrifices at work. Working families need structural, macro-level supports. Family-friendly workplace policies. Constructed problems. The problem of daycare. What do we think the problems are? Abuse, neglected kids, not the same as mom. Really a debate as to whether women should work outside the home. Benefits for women? What are some real problems? No national funding. Employers contribute APX. 1%, costs are too high to find quality. Constructed problems. The problem of babies having babies. Rise in adolescent childbearing. Causes. Wanton sexuality, erosion of respect for marriage, crisis of fatherhood. Or erosion of access to birth control information, restricting birth control, young women not marrying, blame the women. Constructed problems. The problem of fatherlessness. The absent father to blame for social ills. Juvenile delinquency, crime, violence. Boy can't become a man. How else to read this? Feminization of poverty/masculinization of irresponsibility. Is it fatherlessness that causes crime? Or poverty? Neighborhood income highest predictor. The problem of gay and lesbian families. Irony frets over the decline of the family, but also prevention of gays and lesbians to form them. Why marry? Benefits: social security, insurance, immunity, visit in hospital. Fears of gay marriage. No evidence that they influence child sexuality. No evidence of abuse. Secrecy and shame more detrimental to mental health. Oppositions largely based on religious beliefs. Real problem: divorce. U.S. rates of divorce higher than other industrialized nations. People live longer than 100 years ago. Duration of marriage is almost the same. Remarriages comprise about half of all marriages. After divorce, women's income drops. Man's income rises. Many dads withdraw from children's lives. Non-custodial mothers rarely lose contact. Divorce impact on children. Wallerstein found long-term detrimental impact on kids. But her study had no control group. Families recruited through promise of free therapy. Sherilyn: divorce is the outcome of family problems, not the cause. Most children return to normal process of maturation. Children in high conflict homes also report negative outcomes. Divorce that reduces conflict increases well-being of child. Real problem: child custody typically favors the mother. Fathers' rights groups have sprouted. Joint custody good for men. Important to recognize the inputs of the father and the mother. The problem of family violence. Overwhelming amount of family violence is perpetuated by men. Violence against children is controversial. Spanking and slapping. Children who see mothers hit by fathers learn unacceptable behavior. The family of the future. Children need warm, concerned relationship with at least one parent. Crisis of family: really a challenge to family form. Family-friendly workplace policies. Enable families to balance work and home. Direct resources to low-income families, regardless of form. Most dramatic shift. Changing roles of